The CE to urge Beijing to implement the Shanghai-Hong Kong Stock Connect. Student leaders say they'll go to Beijing during the APEC meetings. And in Taiwan, a man rams his car against the presidential residence.
Good evening. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying said today he will urge central government officials to implement the Shanghai-Hong Kong Stock Connect as soon as possible. He'll be in Beijing later this week to attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. And as Owen Fung reports, Leung also called for public order to be restored in Hong Kong.
This Saturday, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying will travel to Beijing to attend the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting. Leung is expected to stay in the capital city for another day after the APEC summit to meet with other central government officials before returning to Hong Kong on the 12th. Today, the chief executive said if he gets a chance to talk to state leaders, he would ask for their support in implementing soon the Shanghai-Hong Kong Stock Connect. Speaking to the press before the Executive Council meeting this morning, Leung also stressed the need for public order to be restored in the SAR.
The protesters who've claimed that court injunctions for them to clear out can be ignored because they're only civil judgments. Leung called this a dangerous mentality that is detrimental to the city's rule of law.
Some protesters in Admiralty, however, disagree.
They didn't listen to our opinion, so we just used this not an cooperative movement to express our opinion. The source of problem is the government, but not the protesters.
This morning, Leung also said he only knew about the dismissal of former Liberal Party leader James Tian from the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference after the decision was announced. The chief executive added that he values his relationship with all the political parties and willingly listens to their criticisms. Leung stressed that even some governments in Western democratic countries are not as humble. And on Thursday, the chief executive will lead a group of officials to attend the Hong Kong-Guangdong Cooperation Joint Conference in Guangzhou. The group will include Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam, Secretary for Transport and Housing Anthony Cheung, and Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Raymond Tam. Owen Fung, TVB News.
It's day 38 of the Occupy protests, and demonstrators are still staying on those streets in Admiralty, Causeway Bay, and in Mong Kok. The Federation of Students has decided to go to Beijing during the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meetings to try to talk to state leaders about the SAR's political reform. While there are mixed views over whether this is a wise move, a poll has shown that the student group now ranks the highest among political parties in Hong Kong. Diane To reports.
Good luck to them. That's all I can say.
That's how Nix Media Chairman Jimmy Lai feels about the student leaders' latest decision to confront Beijing officials over Hong Kong's political future.
I'm not pessimistic. I just don't think those guys will talk to them. You know, those are dictators. You know, you don't talk to dictators like this.
The students' plan now is to go to the capital city while Asia-Pacific leaders gather there for a series of APEC meetings from November the 5th to 11th. But beyond that basic decision, the Federation of Students said it has no further detail as of yet. It expects to have more concrete planning, such as who will go, when will go, and what they'll do if they manage to get to the mainland by Thursday. Jimmy Lai said he believes it's a good idea because even if they're denied entry or arrested, it would create more momentum for the movement. But pro-establishment lawmaker Priscilla Leung says it's quite the contrary. She said rash moves such as this will damage the relationship between the central government and the SAR. She also warned that under the one country, two systems principle, Hong Kong enjoys freedom of expression, but it's a different story under another jurisdiction where laws and policies are not the same. Meanwhile, the Federation of Students has made it for the first time into a top 10 political parties list, as polled by the University of Hong Kong. And the student group has topped the chart with a recognition rate of nearly 90% and the highest rating score of 47.7 points. All the other political parties saw their scores drop. The pro-establishment Federation of Trade Unions and the Liberal Party, placing second and third respectively, both lost around 8 points. Fourth-ranked Civic Party fared the worst, having plunged by 9.4 points. At seventh place, the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong dropped by 6.2 points to 40 points. And behind it is the Democratic Party, whose score has now plunged below 40 points. Director of Public Opinion Programme Robert Chung said this indicates all political groups have become losers in the Occupy movement. Diane To, TVB News.
Meanwhile, another survey has found that more than 70% of respondents think the Occupy protesters should now end their action. Compared with survey results for the past 2 months, more people now think organizers of the Occupy movement should be held responsible for the current impasse, while fewer people blame the government for the prolonged occupation. Liz Yoon has more.
The Center for Social Policy Studies of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University surveyed 554 people on the Occupy movement over the weekend. In its open-ended questions, 38.4% of respondents think the SAR government, including the chief executive and his team, should be accountable for the mass sit-in protests. 31% of those interviewed think the Occupy Central Trio should be held responsible for the current situation. Compared with surveys done in the past 2 months, in which interviewees were asked the exact same question, fewer people now think the government should be held responsible for the impasse, while more people say the Occupy Central Trio is to blame. Researcher Chung Kim Wah thinks the negative effects of the blockade of roads on the economy and the people's daily lives led to the change in public opinion.
I think it's quite normal that people are starting to reconsider who should bear the responsibility of this effect. I think as time moves on, this trend for shifting the responsibility is going to go on. And that's why I think occupiers should really consider how to reformulate their own tactics or strategy.
The latest survey also reveals that nearly 70% of respondents think the Occupy movement continues because of the SAR government's failure to offer positive replies or concession plans in response to occupiers' demands. Nearly 90% of the respondents aged between 18 to 25 think the local government is to be blamed for failing to break the stalemate.
In the medium term or even longer term, I think it's quite difficult for the authority to rebuild confidence of the younger generation on Hong Kong and on one country, two system, and even on the credibility of the government and the central government.
Over 70% of the interviewees think the occupiers should pull out of the occupied areas, while 26.8% disagree. But this does not necessarily indicate whether they support or disagree with the movement. Among those who think the occupiers should stop their action, 47.6% of them are concerned with the negative impact on the economy and livelihoods of the general public. Professor Chung calls on the Federation of Students to consider alternative strategies which does not require the central government to retract its decision on political reform. Liz Yun, TVB News.
In Taiwan, a man rammed his car into a gate this morning at the presidential residence. No one was injured, and the man was arrested. Diane To has the story.
It was just after 7 a.m. when the man drove his car into Gate 3 of President Ma Ying-jeou's official residence in Taipei. The car's front tires were punctured by traffic spikes. A bucket of red paint hung from the front of the vehicle was smashed open, splattering paint over the bumper. No one was injured in the incident. President Ma Ying-jeou was said to be in the residence at the time. Reports said he was immediately informed about the incident but made no comment. Police took away the 60-year-old driver, who was a resident of New Taipei City. Authorities cited the man as saying he used to manage a medical foundation and had petitioned various government bodies and posted articles online over what he called shortcomings in Taiwan's medical system. He reportedly said his petitions didn't receive any replies. Authorities said the man insisted he didn't go to the presidential residence to protest, but to get media attention about his complaints. The presidential office issued a statement saying it respects the right of all residents to express their views, but condemns any use of violence. The man was released on bail this afternoon after being questioned by prosecutors on charges of endangering public safety. Diane To, TVB News.
The two local women who were arrested in Taiwan for theft, forgery, and vandalizing an apartment have been repatriated. The 20-year-old, surnamed Zhang, and her 19-year-old accomplice, Yao, returned to Hong Kong this afternoon after serving a 5-month prison sentence in Taiwan. They've been barred from entering Taiwan for the next 5 years. Taiwanese media reports say the women have apologized for the disruption they caused. In January this year, the duo rented an apartment in Taipei using fake IDs. They also stole from the flat, vandalized it, and left rotting garbage everywhere. The police later arrested the women in Tainan.
Voters in the United States will head to the polls today for midterm elections. Republicans are poised to win the Senate. But with President Barack Obama's popularity at an all-time low, Democrats are struggling to limit their congressional losses.
Candidates around the nation were seen making their final campaign pushes yesterday. Voters are set to elect 36 senators and 36 state governors. Because House of Representative members only serve 2-year terms, all 435 seats are up for grabs. Republicans are confident they'll gain the 6 seats that they need to seize control of the Senate. The GOP already controls the House of Representatives, so a Senate takeover could seriously hinder Obama's remaining 2 years in office.
We could have, for the second time in our history, the majority leader of the Senate setting the agenda for America and taking us in a new direction.
Republicans vow to use Senate control to gain common ground with the president. But rumors are swirling they'll use that power to launch investigative hearings into Obama's poor performance.
President Obama himself said that this election is a referendum on his policies, his programs, and yes, his legacy. He can't take himself off the ballot.
Races are running tight in 10 states. Likely runoffs in Georgia and Louisiana will place Senate control in doubt for some time. Such uncertainty is par for the course for the way voters feel. Many are deeply concerned with the state of the nation's economy and security over the threat of Islamic State. With polls showing the president's approval rating at 41%, Democrats distance themselves from Obama. But U.S. Vice President Joe Biden predicts Democrats will retain their Senate majority. Love or hate Obama, the White House insists the president still wants all Americans to exercise their right to vote.
Even outside of the context of express advocacy for individual candidates, you've heard the president talk about the importance of voting and the importance of people being engaged in their democracy.
Voters in 4 states will also decide whether to legalize marijuana for either recreational or medical use.
In Britain, controversy is growing over the ruling Conservative Party's stand on immigration. British Prime Minister David Cameron has indicated he plans to curb immigration, something that's raised anxiety in the rest of the EU. Alan Booknia reports.
The picturesque town of Roster, with its stately castle and cobblestone streets, doesn't look like a battleground. But the defection of a Conservative Party member to the anti-EU United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, has triggered a by-election that will see the fight over the country's immigration policy played out. Mark Reckless is the defector who quit the Conservatives over the party's EU policy and the bloc's freedom of movement regime.
I welcome there being this clear choice between national independence with control of our borders and David Cameron's agenda of staying in the EU with Angela Merkel and all she requires.
German media reported this weekend that Chancellor Angela Merkel is uneasy about Cameron's plans to curb immigration, even hardening her stance to the point where she'll abandon attempts to keep Britain in the EU. The report was dismissed by the British Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, at the moment you have speculation about what Angela Merkel might have said about a speech that David Cameron has not yet given.
Dieselbe Linie. Es ist zunächst einmal
German government spokesman Stefan Seifert said Monday the free movement of workers within the EU is not